All right, guys. I'm joined by my friend James Geering. We were back here 2 years ago and did a podcast.
I think it was about two.
Yeah, about 2 years ago when I left the fire service. And so I really want him to share with you his background and what he's doing now and what his focus is.
That's the cue. All right, so my name's James Geering. I also was a firefighter for 14 years, worked just because family took me there on the East Coast, the West Coast, and then back to the East again. When I had about 10 years or so on, I started seeing a lot of the ill health in the men and women that I served alongside. We had a horrible couple of years where we lost 6 firefighters, went to all those funerals, really learned how to hate the bagpipes. And it kind of prompted me, along with what we've done together, learned together, that there are so many kind of wellness solutions, so much prevention out there, and our profession wasn't really being taught the right stuff. There were little classes that you could take for a weekend and come back and learn how to do stretchy bands and sit on a Swiss ball, but it wasn't addressing the underlying things that were killing our men and women. So there was a kind of crossover time where I was looking for a podcast to educate myself, to share with other people that would bring these solutions. I heard it in Barbell Shrugged and Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss and these podcasts I listened to, but I didn't see anything that was pertinent to our profession. So when I couldn't find one, that was the kind of sign, like, okay, well then that's you, then you have to do it. So I kind of fumbled my way through learning how to be a podcaster. Very, very rough beginning, but got there in the end, to the point where about 2 years into it, I just was rehabbing a knee injury, about to come back to work, and was at this crossroads where I realized that what I was doing, as the special operations community says, as a force multiplier, was having more effect than riding a rig and running on one call at a time. So I took the jump. I cashed out all my retirement, gave myself a salary for 1.5 years, and then crossed my fingers. So luckily, right around the time the money ran out, I was able to get some amazing companies that I approach, that I love, to jump on board and help support the show. And that's kind of where we're at with the podcast now, 4 years deep and 370 episodes.
Man. And so from that 370, wow, from that you were able to chat with a lot of experts and dive into quite a few different things. And my real hope today was to kind of touch on, the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress syndrome, disease, because I feel like it's something that for first responders have been able to really look at it firsthand, but the general public dealing with post-traumatic stress in life, it's something a lot of people have. And so my hope was that you could maybe share some things that were impactful takeaways that you've been able to gather from experts.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and you are very familiar with this too, is there are multi-facets to it, but then people say, oh, it's super complicated. It's not complicated, but it's like looking at the human body and being, a renal physician. I just do kidneys. And so you discount diet, sleep, all these other things. You're just focusing on disease of that organ. And we've kind of chopped it up in medic school. We learn it the same way. This is the cardiovascular system. And it's the same with mental health. So some of the main takeaways I've come across. The first one, as you know, I harp on this all the time, is sleep deprivation. So we have found our way, and I understand it was probably from when we were playing cards, smoking cigars, petting the Dalmatian and waiting for a fire to come in. Fast forward, to the last 30, 40 years in the fire service, it's EMS, a lot of the urban departments that we worked in, these men and women are running 24 hours straight. So these 56-hour work weeks, 56, 72 if you're a federal firefighter, they're just destroying people physically, destroying people mentally. So that's a huge, huge one. That until we fix that, we're going to keep burying firefighters, police officers, dispatchers. So understanding that, the person that bags your groceries in Publix has to tap out of 40 hours. Why does a person that's going to be awake 3 in the morning working on your pediatric code have 56-hour work weeks, if they even get to go home because they're not understaffed and they get forced another 24? So that was a huge thing. Another big one was, what do you bring into the job? So a lot of people think, oh, PTSD is what you see. Well, to the people at, you know, the World Trade, people at Vegas shooting, absolutely that acute event is definitely going to impact people in a certain way. But so many of the men and women I've had on the show have, some of them, some pretty awful history that they brought in. So, you know, sexual abuse, being around drugs and violence and murder and all kinds of stuff. So if we're not addressing that at the front door, you're already coming in with a basket half full, as it were. So when we, at the moment, it's something I kind of put to people, they spend the money already on the polygraph, which is a complete waste of time. Smoke and mirrors. Right. I lied my way through 3 because I had to, because I was honest on my first application and they literally threw it in my face.
Right.
I was like, so I have to lie to be a firefighter. Because if you're asking people to run into burning buildings and cut children out of smashed up cars, you're probably not going to be in a choir boy and spent 20 years in Bible study.
I wasn't,
you know what I mean?
Totally honest on my
So I mean, it is what it is. It's complete fallacy. And then you have the psych evals, the thousands of you know, bubble answers that you fill in, and I always joke, it's so true. Do you like plants? Do you like trees? Do you like flowers? Do you touch kids? Do you like cooking? Like, wait, what was that? You know, so it's again ridiculous. And I've had, you know, psychologists on that, like, even in our industry, it's such a stupid test. So taking that money you already have and hiring a bunch of people based on their performance and based on their background history, and then putting them through counseling day one and having that relationship with that counselor all the way through their career, and then having counseling transitioning out as a retiree, preparing them for life and having an open door for them to come back. So that's a huge one. And then, you know, as ties in with foundation training, another thing is pain. You know, as you get older, you know, and you start to break, because if you don't sleep, you don't heal, you don't repair. So it's not if, it's when. Right. Categorically, hands down, when. You know, then you get down that slippery slope of pain. You know, that affects your mental health. There's the addiction slippery slope. So those are 3 of the big takeaways, I guess, that people don't talk about. Because the same with cancer, we always focus on decom. It's our gear, it's the carcinogens. Or in my last department, they barely saw any fire, ever. And they had men and women dropping like flies. So no, it's not just that, you know. So if you're not addressing all the underlying things and you're just focusing on traumatic events or PTSD, you're missing the whole thing. So that's my takeaways. And also, push-ups don't solve mental health. Just to let you know.
The challenges. So what, for those 3 areas, do you have any tips for anybody at home that they can do, or takeaways and advice that you've seen help or you found worked for you, in regards to kind of, let's say you're not going to really be able to mitigate the sleep effect when you're on ship, like you're up, but maybe that getting off, like advice for guys that come off a ship where they didn't get any sleep. All
right, so it's a 2-pronged attack, and I think that's the problem. Is people always argue one or the other. A number of times I talk about shifts and the knee jerk from, you know, usually a higher rank, well, they're just going to work overtime. And it's like, well, there's good and bad to that. Say you did have a 24/72, which the whole Northeast does, and you go hang drywall for 8 hours. Is that really detrimental? You're going to be tired, you're probably going to sleep well. I don't think that's bad. But you take a night shift on a rescue, on an ambulance or something, that's terrible. So you've got ownership from the individual, which is the sleep hygiene. So your next day off, you tell yourself, all right, after this certain time, I'm not going to look at my screens. You know, I'm going to put those away. Maybe buy some blue light blocking glasses. I wear them, they work incredibly well. Mindful practice, even if you're not into that, apps like Calm and Headspace are excellent. Just 10 minutes, close your eyes, listen to that will wind you down as well. Another big deregulation mistake I made, and I learned this through initially Jeff Nichols, a Navy SEAL, SEAL Team 6's strength and conditioning coach, and SEAL, kind of a, you know, knowledgeable dude. When you come off shift and you haven't slept, Murph is not the workout to do. You need to be thinking about hikes, a swim. Even if you go to your gym, do 50% of what you would normally do. You know, just move, work through it so you deregulate your nervous system. But the other side of this whole conversation is that you have to, as a union, band together and think about the working conditions, the most basal thing of any union, and start pushing, instead of for a 50-cent pay raise, start pushing for that extra time off. Because if we don't fix that, and then we don't have ownership of our sleep, it's the perfect storm for cancer, heart disease, everything.
Yeah, I always, that was my big one as I left, was recognizing the sleep deprivation, the high stress environments, and I just, in my mind, was that it's almost as if my shields of protection in my own body were down already. So it's like I'm the perfect host for whatever decides it wants to move in if I'm not really careful, you know. And if diet's not there, all that stuff I felt like just starts to go up as far as chance for something. But all of this now has gone into your latest project, and I really wanted to have you share what you've been doing and what people can look forward to if they dive into a copy.
Yeah. So the book I wrote, I'll give you the history of it. One more night. That sounds like a porn. One more light. It started as a blog. So about 4 years ago, there was a whole bunch of things that happened. I started the podcast. I started a Facebook page called the Dark Side Project because we lost, Orlando lost some guys, and Ocala, everyone was losing people over, and even the ones that weren't suicides, we had overdoses that were kept hush hush. It's the same thing. It's a mental health problem. Alcoholism is a mental health problem. So I started that. I made a video called "I Wish My Head Could Forget What My Eyes Have Seen," which freaking went viral, and I just put it out there to put some bullet points of education about sleep, about looking elsewhere. And then I wrote a blog piece called the same title.
Yeah.
And that went viral and got read. And so initially I was like, well, obviously there's something here. I was still doing the podcast. I was, now it kind of steered me to find certain people, and got some incredibly courageous people telling their story of, near suicide, of failed suicide attempts, and I mean that in a positive way. And then I started writing some more blogs, and eventually it came to the point where I wanted to take these and collate them and expand on them to the point where the firefighters or the police officers or whoever was reading it that was within our professions could identify a lot of these wellness elements within themselves, or ill health within themselves, and these causations, these foundational the roots of so many of the ill health that we're seeing reverse engineered.
Right.
And then for the civilians to look into our professions and get educated. I mean, as you know, why is there a fire truck? This is a medical emergency. This is 2020. You should not be asking that anymore.
Everybody asks that question.
So educating them.
You responded with an ambulance? Why?
And even these some of these horrendous officer-involved shootings, there are the black and white ones where the officer was completely wrong, and no one's contesting those. But some of the gray area ones give an insight of what it's like to be sleep deprived and undermanned and all that stuff. So that was the whole point. But it's not the solutions in there. I talk about some of the things that work for me. I talk about foundation training, for example, on one of the chapters. But it's to get people to question, because as you know, I think one of the biggest failures in wellness is someone creates a 12 DVD set and says, this is how you should exercise, this is how you should eat, subscribe to me and we'll send you the food in the mail, you don't even have to do anything. No, you have to find your own way. And Inuit and an Aboriginal are not going to have the same DNA makeup, so that's what I want to do. I just wanted people to get educated and angry. Simple as that. Because then you band together, you stop looking at the person at the top of the pyramid, expecting them to make the changes, and you take ownership yourself, and you have a control of your own wellness. And then the podcast is the deep dive. You go in there, and if you love plant-based, there's people for you there. If you're more paleo carnivore based, then there's people for you there. If you're a CrossFit person, if you're a triathlete, so now you can find your wellness information. But it's not a how-to, it's a biography and lessons learned from biography from my career and my life, and just little short stories. I mean, it's not like James Geering's story, no one wants to read that. But it's lessons learned on mental health, physical health, addiction, obesity, all these things, but just through the lens of what we see. And we have such a unique perspective that most people, don't. And just to highlight one area, how many times have you worked a code on someone that has a giant bag of meds, thousands of dollars of meds, and they died at 47?
Right, yeah, all the time.
So, but people believe that those meds keep them healthy. They don't. They change the metrics on the blood pressure cuff. That's it. They
Yeah.
still died. So just giving them that focus to see that, and then like I said, from within the responder world, it's definitely sleep deprivation, mental health, some of the things that we see, and taking those elephants in the room, bringing them out of the shadows and into the spotlight.
Yeah, and you had how did you come to work with the guy that wrote your foreword? I'm really curious.
So Josh Brolin, yeah, he's obviously well known. It was funny, I actually was up there recording him narrating the foreword for the audiobook, and went for breakfast, and I saw some people just kind of like, and I said, I'm sorry, I know it's embarrassing, but obviously those guys know I'm James from Behind the Shield.
Nice.
But no, but it's a beautiful story. So I was first introduced to Amanda Marsh, who's Eric Marsh's widow. Eric was the supervisor of the Prescott 19, or Prescott 20, it would have been, the Hot Shots. And so we did a great conversation. I mean, she was grieving, then she battled addiction. It was a very powerful story. I had Brendan McDonough on the show, who was the survivor, that he was on a separate peak as a lookout. So obviously he lost 19 of his brothers. I mean, again, another horrendous journey that he took after that. He's doing incredibly well now, running an addiction program, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So through all that, I reached out and was able to connect with Josh, and I had him on the show as well because he portrayed Eric in the movie.
Yeah.
So we developed that relationship, and he watched from afar. And he has a lot of people trying to reach out. But when we did the interview, we ended up like growing a friendship, like a true friendship. But a really interesting side note for that is through Brendan, when I had him, it was actually through the press junket. So they were actually promoting the film at that point. So I was going through Sony Pictures. And one of my Orange County brothers, JP, was a squad guy, had this very rare autoimmune disease. And he was basically, had days to live.
Wow.
And his wife, Rachel, had reached out and said, hey, is there any way of you facilitating a showing in the house? It was just about to come in the movies. It hadn't come out yet, but there was no way he was able to go and sit in a movie theater. Sony flew a hard copy of that movie from LA to Lauderdale. Then one of their people drove it all the way up to his house.
Wow.
And gave him a private showing. So that whole film and all these people around it has been so powerful. And then through our friendship, Josh even ended up writing the foreword for the book. So,
awesome.
Yeah,
you
it's
just up there with
beautiful.
him.
Yeah. So
a couple signed copies going out, raising donations is awesome. Well, how would you say your perspective on wellness has shifted from the early days for James in the fire service to now?
Wellness instead of fitness.
Yeah.
That's the big thing. So obviously, I mean, I'm 46, so I joke about, I don't joke, but I refer a lot to when I was young, what we were taught. So lifting was the Globo Gym bodybuilding type, and I'm talking about the modern one. The old school bodybuilders were doing it all right, but as you know, we got away from that. And so, that's how I trained. And then the nutrition, like before you're going to work out, giant bowl of pasta and all this stuff. So we had to unlearn so much. But then the focus is, as you know, as a young fireman or youngish, you're focusing on performance and you want to be the best version. But as I got through my career and started seeing it in myself, I went through a divorce, and then was in paramedic school working one of the busiest rescues in Orange County. And as a single dad, I started getting this different lens on the difference between wellness and fitness. Like I'm fit enough. I get it now, but I can't even see straight. I'm so damn tired. I can't decompress. I'm ready to murder someone. I've got a hair trigger. So it was kind of shifting the focus, and then the injury, the back injury that led me to foundation training, that almost ended my career.
Yeah.
It really did. And foundation training, this isn't a paid commercial, saved it. I mean, I was doing PT, and my improvement was a very gradual thing, but workman's comp wanted surgery and pills and all that stuff. And when I found that, I was so blown away, as you know, that I flew over to California and became an instructor. So yeah, that's it. It's the longevity piece is, you have to get to a certain point, and it's funny, they call minimum standards for a reason. Like, you just got to the point where you're able to enter the profession. Now, younger firemen, you got to keep working on those skills and that fitness. But as you start getting about 10 years in, it needs to shift to the wellness piece and injury prevention, mobility, and the mental health, mindfulness, all that side.
Yeah, it'll be. I'm really interested to see where things get in the next 3 to 5 years with a lot of the different tools they're using for research and especially for things like PTSD. I don't know if you've read that book Stealing Fire as of yet, but it was just mind-blowing on just some of the research they're doing for getting people to a flow state, let alone same tools they're using now, my understanding, for research on PTSD. We had chatted about it a little bit before with psilocybin.
Yep.
And, just amazing. But any other advice for individuals out there, man? Before we sign this thing off, tips, advice, tools? You gave us a couple.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I don't want to be a Karen. Whatever the male version is, Keith. It's understand that the job is trying to kill you. And that sounds dramatic, but it's true. If you're in an urban department and you're on one call every 2 or 3 shifts, you're in a much better place. But the reality is most urban, suburban firefighters, police officers, dispatchers, correction officers, everyone that's in those professions, doctors and nurses too, especially junior doctors, residents, look at your work week, and look at the amount of time that you have. Consider in whatever organization you're in, looking at places that do it better. There's a lot of countries, a lot of areas in this country that are doing it really well, like Boca Raton in Florida, for example. And understand that if you don't get that rest and recovery, you will break. It's a foregone conclusion. As far as the physical side, you're going to break because you're not able to recover, and then there's that mental element too. So really refocus on the wellness as an individual. Own your own fitness, own your own wellness, but make it a priority. You're going to get so much poo-pooing of the fitness side in the fire service, and if they're just talking about PRing your deadlift and that's all you ever hear from them, then maybe they need to get some education too. But this is a great profession to be a part of, but you have to work extremely hard to stay well enough to be able to do it, and so many of our men and women are hurting behind closed doors, whether it's just pure anxiety, depression, whether it's turning to opiates, alcohol, gambling, even just social media. If you're constantly looking at your phone, ask yourself why. So again, not a plug at all, but if you kind of want just an insight, it's written at a kindergarten level.
Great for firefighters.
Exactly. Buy a firefighter.
Got me.
That kind of just puts these questions out there, and then, like I said, the beautiful thing is the rabbit holes are open. Whether it's my podcast, whether it's someone else, you then start that journey. But knowledge is power. If you don't understand the things that you're working against, you're never going to be able to control your own wellness.
Right on, man. Well, we'll put some plugs on there for the podcast, for the book. And I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Give me some time, bro. Almost pulled me over the chair. Yeah, we'll see you.